What's going on, my good people? Welcome back to Roll the Clip TV. Good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday, happy Sunday. I don't know when you're watching this. Kind of don't even know when I'm going to upload it, but I know it's going to be this weekend. So welcome to Roll the Clip TV podcast. As always, I try to push out these podcasts to try to take my time a little bit more. But today I want to deal with a subject that I'm not necessarily sure if I'm qualified to talk about. But I'm gonna give it my shot. I'm gonna give it a shot. I want to talk about church hurt. If you have not been to church, if you have never been involved in ministry or church, go ahead and go to another channel. Go ahead and subscribe. I mean, not subscribe. Thank you for subscribing here. But go ahead and, because you're not gonna understand the damn word I'm about to say. You're not gonna understand anything I'm about to say. Let me start by saying this. Anybody who's ever been hurt in church or by ministry, it's almost like a divorce in some way, shape, or form. I kind of grew up in church as a young teen. You know what's crazy? If you were in church as a young person and you grew up as an adult, that disconnection just stays with you sometimes. And it took me a very, very long time, and probably not until I met my wife, or I was almost 40 by the time I realized, by the time I came to grips with that, not to be mad at God, the things I was angry about had to do with people in a building. And I think that's one of the things that keeps people away, especially young people, away from God more than anything else. The church has a bad habit of judging and pointing fingers when that's not what God has called us to do. God has called us to help to restore. But that's a different topic. I don't want to talk about that. So I was about 13 or 14. No. Maybe like around 14 when I first went to church, Faith Fellowship Ministries in Edison, New Jersey. Pastor David T. DeMola. He was Italian. He had the biggest hands, and he would like Robert and just he just grab your face. Great minister of God, very down to earth. Our pastor now, Pastor Dollar, is very down to earth, and that's what I look for, down to earthness. Not a theologian who can't relate to where I am in the middle of life today. But when you grow up in church, there's a very scary element that because you're so young, your whole life is there. You live. Listen, I started going to church at 14, 15 years old, and it just became my life. I loved it. I loved everything about it. I got involved in the youth ministry. I was involved in youth ministry heavy. Very, very heavy. Became my life. I'll come back to that in a moment. But then in my 20s, my life kind of took a nosedive per se, because I quote unquote, what they called at the time, sinned. And that began my break in terms of church hurt. When the church begins to point their finger at you. And for those of you who've been through it, you know. If you grew up in the 80s like me in church, you could not sin. You were going to hell. That was it. They preached about the devil, and if you don't live the right way, you're gonna go to hell. And if you don't read your Bible, you're gonna go to hell. And if you don't pray at 6 o'clock in the morning, you better. And if you don't give, a brick is coming through your window. That was a culture in the 80s in the church. And we're talking about a faith church, a non-denominational church, which is supposed to be free and based upon your relationship with God. But unfortunately, it really was just the time. If you have been around the church for any length of time, you'll know that there's these different phases and facets of ministry. And then sometimes the byproduct of these things is that there becomes disagreements, schisms. I think that it was called back in the day. So anyway, my schism came because of quote unquote sin. I was having a child out of wedlock, and I try. The reason why I repeat these stories at times is because of new visitors who may come in who may not know me, just to give you a background of my mindset. But I remember at the time, again, I was in maybe 21, 22 years old at the time. I had been in this church forever. Served in every capacity. I loved to clean the bathrooms. That was listen. And I'm gonna get to this in a minute. But one of the things I loved is that in youth ministry, the youth pastor, he was John Wagner at the time, who is now the senior pastor at what was Faith Fellowship. I believe it's called Epic, and we'll get back to that in a moment too. But we used to go away on these youth retreats, and we would get there on Fridays and have praise and worship, and then Saturdays, different speakers would come in. And I remember this guy named Ferris Hill. I don't know where he is today. I'm talking about this. This is like the '80s, late '80s, or early '90s, y'all. And so my recollection of the church is kind of dated. But I remember Ferris Hill used to get on. He would come up and sing, and he had this song called "Set Me on Fire." Set me on fire once more. Don't hate on my singing voice, y'all. Don't y'all hate on my singing voice. I know y'all like to hate on my voice at times because I got these, God bless me with these vocals, but don't hate. So he would come and sing, set me on fire once more so the world can watch me burn for you. And all the teens would be at the altar crying, God help me, Jesus. Jesus, I don't want to sin no more. God help me, Lord Jesus. Jesus, I love you. I'm going to be sold out for you. And then we read this book. At the time. We were in youth ministry called Critical Mass by, what was his name? Mario Murillo. Critical Mass. It changed it changed my thinking, y'all. Changed my thinking, revolutionized the way I thought. It was a beautiful time. It probably because we were so innocent as kids, and I didn't have enough of the world's perspective in me yet. Oh my God. Church hurt, y'all. So, Pastor DeMola hired this youth pastor named John Wagner. This is where I'm going with the church hurt. And maybe not immediately, but somewhere within his first year, he was older. Clearly, he was youth pastor. I was 14 or 15 years old. He just looked at me one day. He said, God got a special plan for you. Stick around. And I never left his side for about four or 5 years. Now I'm good. Now I'm 14 and I'm 15 and 16, and I'm in the Bible. I'm in his Bible studies every week. We had youth ministry. We had 2 services on Sunday at the time. We had 1 service on Thursday at the time, and we just did a whole bunch of extra stuff, and we had a whole praise and worship team. I mean, just very similar to the way you see the churches are today. But again, back then, it wasn't common. There wasn't churches this size where I think at one point we had almost like 600 or 700 teenagers in youth ministry. I don't know what there is now, y'all. I'm just talking from my perspective. I'm trying to give you the background of my why what I'm about to say hurt me so bad. And so John Wagner started this thing called Team 91. And we were the leaders within youth ministry. We at the end, when the teens would come, we would join hands with them and pray with them and give them the prayer of salvation. And he would call on us to do different things. But there was always this special, and I'm really grateful for this, y'all. And I'm trying to hold it together. I'm trying to hold this together, y'all, because at this time you got to realize. I came from Elizabeth, New Jersey. This church was in Edison. There was times where we took the bus. He had buses come to different areas. And so from Elizabeth, New Jersey, this white man, young white man, at the time, kind of preppy-ish at the time. He had the blonde hair to cut and kind of nerdy at the time. But he had this thing where he was like, you got a purpose to you. And so it was canceling out all of the negativity when I went back home to Elizabeth, New Jersey, around the crack dealers, and I was in high school around the drugs and the violence. So that was my break in reality, and so I began to gravitate to that lifestyle more and more and more and more. And there was one day he pulled me aside because he was going away on vacation. Come on, boy, you can do this. And he said, look, I'm going on vacation. I want you to preach 2 services in the youth ministry. Yo, I almost passed out. Dudes, I almost fainted. For those of you who were involved in ministry and you grew up in ministry as a teen, when you got to sing or when you got to dance, when you at that time when you got to do something in front of your ministry, when you were so in love with it, you remember for those of you listening, you remember when you were so. I'm not talking about the in love like today. I'm talking about as a young kid before we had the world in our minds. He asked me to preach 2 services, y'all. My brothers and sisters, I preached the freaking house down. I didn't know what I was doing, had no clue. I knew that God spoke to me. He gave me a Bible verse. As a matter of fact, I remember it to this day, and I will never forget it. It is the one verse that I hold dear to my heart every single day. And Philippians 4:19. He that hath began the good work in you is faithful to complete it. I'm not going to preach that message right now, y'all, because I feel it. I feel a little bit of it, and I probably could preach it right now. But that was my go-to verse. That was my verse back then. And I don't remember what I said. I said a bunch of stuff about God, a bunch of stuff about about stomping on the devil, and a bunch of other things. And all I know is at the end of it, there was an altar call, and teenagers came up and gave their life to Christ. Beautiful. This man trusted me. This man trusted me. And listen, I got to put this in perspective for everybody, y'all, because when I say this man trusted me, this man made me feel accepted in a room where no other man made me feel accepted. For those of my brothers watching this, and you've had issues with a fatherlessness issue, no father at home or father rejecting you. I shared this before, so I'm not going to go into it. Go back to my other videos when I talk about dads. I didn't have that. I didn't have a father, or I had 2 fathers, but neither one of them chose to make me feel important in the room where they were in. But this man did. So I was there for the 4, and I got to speed the story because I can have story after story after story. And I traveled with him. I remember there was times when he spoke at different churches and he would call me up to pray. And for 4 years, I had a dad. In my head, y'all. In my head. And so for those of you who have ever been involved in any type of ministry, youth ministry, you get what I'm saying right now. You feel me right now. And I had no idea, y'all, that it was going to come to an end. I had no idea that this season of my life, was going. I had no idea. I was a kid, 15, 16, 17. I think by the time he was leaving, I was just about to turn 18. And he was there. He served, and it was time for him to move on. He said to us that somebody else was going to come and take over. And that was it. It wasn't bad. I mean, and now as an adult, I get it. People grow in God, and people's assignment, your assignment in God will change at some point. And that's all it was. I just was so young and kind of so naive. I just didn't know that his assignment was changing. All I knew was that this particular man, come on, get it together. This man gave me a shot. I went to Bible school after I graduated. He was there. He was a teacher there. At the time, I went to school of ministry. I graduated Bible school and school of ministry. Aced it with flying colors. I was a C average student. So when I say y'all, he made me feel important in the room as a young black boy. I was an average student. There wasn't nothing special about me. I didn't play sports. I wasn't good in basketball. I was tall and skinny, diesel now. But I was average. That was it. I graduated. There was nothing special about me. Or at least I didn't know. Until the moment when this man said, God has a plan for you. That light bulb, that switch opened up a whole new world. I was reading books I never thought I would read. I was doing things I never dreamed of doing. And then it was over, y'all. And I didn't have the skill set to navigate that era in my life. And I think what happened was he wanted me to be youth pastor and take over, but I had sinned. Real talk. I'm almost positive he did. But unfortunately, I messed up. That was the culture at the time. This is early 90s. That's just what happened. And life continues. He moved on, and I think he went down to Florida at the time. So that's when I was just on my own. And it just felt like I was here, and everything from there went down. I'm very blessed and very fortunate today. But I'm going to tell y'all, it took years. There was sometimes where I wanted to throw the towel in. I don't want to say it. Y'all can figure that rest of it out for yourself, because it just felt like life was so hard. And at the time, the culture at the time, when you messed up like that, you were criticized, you were ridiculed. And I even had my mother say some very, to me, was ungodly stuff at the time that freaking floored me. How do you overcome all of this? See, as adults, we struggle because I still love God. Listen, there's a part of me that is so hardened because the world has not been kind to that young black boy after that point. And I didn't have the skill set to navigate life. I didn't have the home environment that helped me navigate life to be successful. My only point of reference that God allowed me these 4 to 5 years in that youth ministry. Yes, I didn't leave the church at the time. I didn't actually leave until years later. I may have been like 27 years old by the time I completely broke, because I was broken. I was broken. I prayed. I prayed. I thought God just turned his back on me. That's just how I felt like God turned his back on me. Let me fast forward, y'all, so I can wrap this up. My wife and I have been married will be 9 years in a month or so. It's been the largest healing factor in my life, between God and I. My wife is just a praying woman. I talk about my wife a lot, y'all, because I'm on camera, but she's always here. It's always us doing this. It's never just me doing this. And I always want to communicate this because you need to brag about your wife. You need to brag about your girl anyway. But her faith. And so we started going to faith fellowship. After God rest his soul, Pastor DeMola had passed away. Actually, we were going. We had started when we were dating. Her church was in New York, and so we would kind of sometimes go to her church and sometimes go to on Sundays. Her church was Saturday nights. In the Bronx, and then we would go to sometimes Sunday services with all of the kids. And Pastor DeMola prayed for us together one time, which was a blessing. But Pastor DeMola had passed away, and John had came back. He's now the full-time pastor. I believe the church now is epic. I haven't talked to him in years. I'm sharing this story because when to my young people, to the parents, it is so crucial that we all understand that in church or in ministry, in God, a lot of times as a teenager, we don't really know how to navigate the stages of life as well as some adults. And that's where I went wrong. I was stuck, y'all. Anyway, so we started attending again. I'm gonna fast forward this, and this is the part I wanted to get to, just to be totally transparent. And I'm gonna try to hold it together. And so Pastor Wagner now is the full-time pastor. Him and his wife and his kids. We were attending one Sunday service, and I saw him come in. He was standing there, and he waved at me. He always, the city is nothing but love. He waved at me. And his wife walked in with his kids, his son. I don't know how old his son is. His son was a teenager at the time. This is going back almost 8 years now, y'all. And he walked in with his son, and his son hugged him. And I saw the smile on his face. And it reminded me of the smile, how he used to smile at me when I walked into service on Sundays and Thursday evenings. This is his biological son. Of course, at this point now, I'm in my late 40s or mid 40s or whatever, and I just looked. I looked at, and I was frozen. Because I got jealous. I didn't have a dad no more. All right, I'm good. I got jealous, y'all. I told him I got jealous, and I never went back. Right, wrong, ugly, good, bad. I'm just being transparent. There's no easy way to overcome church hurt. Identifying these things is what helps. So I'm telling you how I identified. I realized in that moment. Y'all, when I saw his son come in and how he looked at him and he embraced him, and how he did the same thing to me, pat me on the back. You know that. What a dad should have done to me, right? I realized all of them years, I was just trying to get back to the place I was as a teenager. And life doesn't work that way, y'all. We have these seasons in life and we have these things, but life doesn't work that way. Life works as once you move on, it's like it's a freaking runaway train, a locomotive that just has no damn brakes. It just keeps going and going and going and going. And I'm making this story very short. I could fill a bunch of stuff in here, but I don't want to go on and on and on. I want to connect so that look, these are real things that we go through. It wasn't God. It was the fact I lost my dad. You understand what I'm saying? I get it. I'm still wrong for it. My heart and my hope should have always been in God. But I was a kid. I mean, now I know. But back then, I just didn't know. I didn't know what I didn't know. As my wife always says, you just don't know what the hell you don't know. But in that moment, I realized all these years, I had a business that was somewhat that was successful. Let me not say somewhat. For me, it was a success. I retired from it. I realized I was trying to be successful to get his attention. That's why I like this stuff, y'all. I could talk forever. Well, my wife would tell you I could talk forever. I'm not going to talk y'all forever. I'm just trying to drive this point home. Church hurt is real. I mean, some people have been, I could talk about church hurt. I could talk about church hurt because this is the aspect that where I know I was wrong. At that time, at 40-some years old, in that moment, I the only thing I felt was jealousy. That's my fault. That's my fault. Good, bad, or ugly. But I could talk about church hurt, the betrayal of parents. Lord, can I? People talking behind your back, kicking your back in. When there's just a part of you that just say, hey, God, I love you. Even now, like, sometimes you go to church and everybody's so freaking weird. I'm going to be myself. Like it or love it, you don't like it, then you move on. My wife is going to be herself. We don't water down ourselves at home. I am not going to go in service and have a Bible under my arm and be, no, I am Robert. That's me. This is who I am. I am God's child. I'm human. And I'm doing the best with what he gave me. That's all we can hope to do. And I think the sad part, especially growing up in it, there's this expectation of excellence that most people can't fulfill. It's one thing to become better every single day and to achieve excellence, but there's something totally different to try to be sin-free. There's only one man that's ever going to be sin-free. That's why we have grace. That's why he's our Savior. Point blank in the story. All the rest of us are just trying to be better in Christ every single day. But that's my story, y'all. And so I had to just let things go little by little by little. And now I'm like, it wasn't God. All them years in my 20s and me pushing and wanting to achieve. Because when you're a little ghetto boy who gets no attention for nothing, nobody thought I was anything. I can't stress that enough. They put my brother in private school because, quote unquote, he was so intelligent. He was so smart. So my parents spent their money, put him in private school. But I just had public school education, Elizabeth, New Jersey. I'm a byproduct of that. And guess what? I'm okay with that because at some point in time, I was blessed to have this particular individual say to me, you are special. God loves you. And I'm going to tell y'all something. No matter what it looks like, I know I am chosen by God. I am called by God. I have never, ever shaken that. My gift is not limited anymore to the four walls of any building. Although I will bless the four walls of any building. Y'all get what I'm saying? Little by little. Just got to let it go. Life keeps going on. And it's just one of them things, my brothers and sisters, that it is what it is. I hope I was transparent enough. I wish I could go into detail more, but I'm already at about 30 minutes. the time period when he left, maybe till I was about 20, almost 30, almost 10 years, were absolute hell. I was a kid. I had no life skills. Because the only thing I was planning for was to preach. That's why I went to Bible school and ministry. I wanted to be like him. I didn't have a father to look after me. A father to look up to. So when somebody puts you in a room and somebody sits you down and somebody cares for you enough to take time of your personal development. Yo, there was even times when I was in Bible school. I remember when I was in Bible school. My mother was in Bible school at the same damn time. I remember in Bible school. It ain't no knock on her. I'm telling you the truth. I remember it was he had a class called The Life of David, and I aced it. A's. My mother's like, that's cause you John's boy. It wasn't because I was his boy. It was because I found something I was really, really good at. And somebody believed that I was good at it. And that was just it, y'all. Y'all let me know what y'all think about this video. There's so many faces that come to mind through that era of the late 80s and 90s into the 2000s that had gifts and were promised certain things and nothing manifested. We were kids, and so when somebody promised you something in church as a kid, you looked up to it. Listen, I know it, but we were kids, and unfortunately, y'all, I probably gave my kids too much of a dose of reality, because in my mind, unfortunately, I felt like the rug was pulled from underneath me. I wasn't prepared. I sinned. Whatever. It was what it was. And I became the complete opposite. And there's a very long time that I ran from God. I was angry. You left me, God. You left me. How could you leave me? And it wasn't God. It was that in my mind, this father figure left me, y'all. I just had to come to grips with it. That God's my father, and that's it. Anyway. Thank y'all for checking out Roca TV. Thank y'all for checking the podcast. Yeah, I get kind of deep, kind of heavy, y'all, because it is what it is. Because you know what? This is the heat I want to bring to my channel. I could talk to y'all about a bunch of superficial things that don't really matter in the world. There's a bunch of stuff going on in the world. This week, we're going to watch Trump and Biden debate, which should be phenomenal. But even after we watch the debate, even after we go back to our jobs, even after we, do all these different things, there are so many brothers who are hurting because the church hurt that many times we can't get it. We can't even get involved in ministry because there's this unseen force, a barrier. Y'all get at me. Peace.
Bye. Got something to say. Hey, you got something to say.